He blocked me on everything. I think I deserve it, but I can't breathe. The first thing I registered was the taste of stale wine and regret. The second was the jackhammer pounding behind my eyes. My apartment was a disaster zone, empty bottle on its side, a kicked-over throw pillow, my jacket crumpled on the floor like a casualty. It was a perfect reflection of how I felt. My hand, trembling slightly, fumbled for my phone on the nightstand. The screen was cold against my cheek as I squinted at it, my thumb already swiping to my messages with Jake. I was looking for his name, for a reply, for anything. Instead, what I found was a monument to my own insanity. A waterfall of my own blue text bubbles, a nauseating, seemingly endless scroll of pure, undiluted panic from the night before. It started with a simple "Hey, you home yet?" and devolved message by message into a frantic, ugly tirade, accusations, pleading, vicious, paranoid questions about who he was with. I could feel the bile rise in my throat just looking at it. My thumb finally reached the bottom of my digital meltdown. There was no reply, no "I'm sorry," not even a "we need to talk." There was only a single sterile line of gray text beneath my last desperate plea. "You can no longer reply to this conversation." A cold shock, sharp and electric, shot through my chest. Blocked, I scrambled, my heart hammering against my ribs, and opened Instagram. His profile, the one filled with photos of us, of his dog, of the stupidly beautiful sunsets he loved, was gone. Just a blank page that said, "User not found." WhatsApp. My last message had a single gray tick. Facebook Messenger, the icon next to his name, prompted me to send a friend request. He hadn't just ended a conversation. He had digitally amputated me from his life. And as the full, crushing weight of that reality settled in, the room started to spin, and I realized I had completely, utterly forgotten how to breathe. It wasn't a fight, that's the sickest part. It was a self-immolation, and I was the one holding the match. Last night, he'd called me on his way out of the office. His voice was gentle but heavy. "Hey Cam," he'd said, the sound of traffic faint in the background. "Just a heads up, I'm probably going to be off-grid tonight. We're all going to my parents' place for dinner." For Amelia. Amelia, his older sister. She and her husband had been trying for a baby for years, and last week, after 5 fragile months of hope, they lost it. My heart ached for her, for them, for Jake, who adored his sister. "Of course," I'd said immediately, my voice soft with genuine sympathy. "Tell her I'm sending all my love. Don't worry about me at all, just be with them." "Thanks, I knew you'd get it," he'd sounded relieved. It's going to be a rough one. I'm just going to put my phone away and be present for her. I'll text you when I'm on my way home, okay?" "Okay," I'd promised. "I love you." "I love you too." And for a while, I was fine. I made dinner, put on a show I didn't really watch, and felt a quiet pride in being the supportive, understanding girlfriend. The kind of partner a good man like Jake deserved. But then the silence in my apartment started to grow teeth. The rational part of my brain, let's call her sane Camille, knew exactly where he was and why he wasn't texting. But another part of me, a wounded, snarling creature that lives in my gut, started to stir. It's the part of me my ex, Daniel, created. The part that was conditioned to believe that silence is never just silence. It's a curtain for betrayal. "He's just with his family," sane Camille insisted. "That's what Daniel said too," the creature hissed back. "Remember his sick grandmother? She was a 22-year-old bartender from Scottsdale." I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to banish the thought. It was unfair to Jake. He was nothing like Daniel, but the poison was already seeping in. At 8 p.m., I sent the first text, a test, just a little one. "Hey, hope you got there okay. Thinking of you guys, X." An hour crawled by, no response. The creature in my gut was doing victory laps. "See, he read it. The check marks are blue. He saw it and he's ignoring you." "He told you he would be unavailable," sane Camille pleaded. "You are choosing to be hurt." I ignored her. My thumbs started to move, fueled by a toxic cocktail of cheap wine and rising panic. 9:15 p.m., everything all right, getting a little worried. 9:40 p.m., "Jake, it only takes 10 seconds to let me know you're okay." 10:30 p.m. "Are you deliberately ignoring me? I'm starting to feel like an idiot here." With every unanswered message, my sanity frayed a little more. I was a passenger in my own body, watching in horror as my fingers typed out words I didn't even recognize as my own. I was replaying the worst night of my life with Daniel, but casting Jake in the starring role. The context, his grieving sister, his explicit warning, evaporated into the fog of my paranoia. All that existed was the glowing screen, the damning silence on the other end, and the roaring in my ears. Then came the final, unforgivable barrage. A rapid-fire assault born from pure, unadulterated fear. "Fine, be with her, I knew it, there's someone else there, isn't there?" This is exactly what he did. Used a family tragedy as an excuse to cheat. God, I'm so stupid. You know what? I bet Amelia isn't even that upset. You're probably all using it as an excuse to have a party and you just didn't want me there. That last one, even as I typed it, a cold, sober part of my brain screamed in absolute horror. Stop, do not send that, you can never take that back, but the creature was in control. My thumb hit send. And then I sent another and another, a torrent of vile, baseless accusations until the wine bottle was empty and I passed out on the couch, my phone falling to the floor with a soft thud. I was punishing him for a crime he didn't commit, all because I couldn't bear the thought of being hurt again. And in doing so, I had become the very thing I was terrified of. The panic was a physical thing, a clawing beast in my chest. I couldn't sit still. I paced the length of my small living room, phone clutched in my hand like a talisman, my thumb compulsively swiping, checking, rechecking. Blocked, still blocked, the digital walls were absolute. My first coherent thought was, Olivia. Olivia was our bridge, we met through her. She was my friend from college, his from a previous job. She was the one who set us up, who hosted the barbecues we both attended, who knew us as both individuals and as a couple. She had to help me. She had to be my ambassador, my translator to the world I'd just been exiled from. I dialed her number, my fingers clumsy. It rang 3 times before she picked up. Camille. It's barely 9 a.m. on a Saturday. Is everything okay? Her voice was thick with sleep. No, I sobbed, the single word cracking open the dam. No, nothing is okay, it's Jake. He broke up with me. What? No, he didn't. I literally talked to him yesterday afternoon. He was nervous about the dinner for Amelia, but he was so glad you were being supportive. Her words were a knife twisting in my gut. Supportive, I was the opposite of supportive. I did something, Liv, I wailed, collapsing onto my couch. I did something really, really stupid. I recounted the night's events, the story spilling out of me in a torrent of shame and self-loathing. I tried to frame it, to soften the edges, to make myself sound less like a psychopath and more like a girl who was just scared. I emphasized my past trauma with Daniel, hoping it would act as some kind of mitigating circumstance. And then I woke up and he's blocked me on everything. He just disappeared. Can you please just call him, tell him I'm sorry, tell him I was drunk and scared and I didn't mean it. The line went quiet. It wasn't the comforting silence of a friend gathering their thoughts to offer solace. It was a heavy, awkward silence, the kind of silence that stretches and stretches until it becomes an answer in itself. I could hear her breathing, a soft, measured sound against the frantic pounding of my own heart. Liv, are you there? I whispered. I'm here, she said finally. Her voice had changed. The sleepy warmth was gone, replaced by a careful, almost clinical neutrality. Camille, what did you say to him? Exactly. I couldn't bring myself to repeat the message about Amelia. I just mumbled, I said some things I shouldn't have, I accused him of things. Another beat of that awful, judging silence. He told you where he was going, she stated. It wasn't a question. He told you it was about his sister's miscarriage and he wouldn't be on his phone. I know, but… No buts, she said, her voice firm but not unkind. Camille, I can't get in the middle of this. You're not getting in the middle, you're just passing on a message. I pleaded, my voice rising with desperation. No, she said, and this time it was final. You're asking me to be your messenger after you detonated a bomb in the middle of his family's grief. I'm not doing that to him. Or to them, she took a breath. Look, I'm sorry you're hurting, I really am, but maybe you should just give him some space, a lot of space. It was the most polite, brutal rejection I had ever experienced. She wasn't yelling at me, she wasn't calling me a monster, she was just withdrawing, creating a careful distance. And in that moment, I felt a profound and terrifying sense of isolation. I hadn't just been blocked by Jake, I was being quarantined by our friends. They weren't picking his side, they were just stepping away from the blast radius I had created. For 3 days, the silence was absolute. It was a living entity in my apartment, pressing in on me from all sides. I barely ate. Sleep came in short, feverish bursts, filled with nightmares where I was screaming into a phone that had no microphone. I called out sick from my job as a paralegal, telling my boss I had a stomach flu. The lie was flimsy, but I couldn't imagine facing anyone, couldn't imagine trying to string together coherent sentences about contract law when my own personal contract had been so violently terminated. Every ping from my phone sent a jolt of adrenaline through me, a pathetic surge of hope that was immediately crushed when it turned out to be a promotional email or a notification from a news app. He hadn't unblocked me, he hadn't reached out through a mutual friend, he was just gone. It was a masterclass in disappearance. On the 4th day, I broke. The not knowing was worse than anything. I couldn't live in this limbo, suspended between a horrific mistake and a silent, unknown consequence. I needed a verdict, even if it was a guilty one. My pride was a distant memory, a luxury I could no longer afford. I did something I knew was pathetic and manipulative, a Hail Mary born of pure desperation. I opened my work email. His sister, Amelia, was a graphic designer. I'd met her a few times at family functions. She was kind, quiet, with a warmth that Jake shared. I found her professional contact information online. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely type. I drafted the email a dozen times, each version more groveling than the last. I settled on a version that tried to mask my desperation with a thin veneer of polite concern. Subject, checking in. Hi, Amelia. I hope this isn't an inappropriate way to reach out. I know you and the family are going through an incredibly difficult time, and I've been thinking of you all constantly. I'm just writing because I haven't been able to get in touch with Jake for a few days, and I'm getting worried. I know he wanted to be there for you, and I just wanted to make sure he's okay. I'm so sorry if I'm intruding. All my best. Camille. I hit send before I could lose my nerves. The wait was agonizing. For 6 hours, I did nothing but refresh my inbox, my stomach churning. Then it appeared, a reply from her. Subject, Ray, checking. Camille. Jake is fine. He's with us. I appreciate your concern for my family, but I'll be honest, your timing is astounding. I'm not going to pretend I don't know what happened. He showed me the messages. I'm not writing this to be cruel, but to give you the context you so clearly lacked. Jake's last relationship ended because of a woman who did exactly what you did. She used his phone as a leash. She treated silence as a confession of guilt. Her constant, paranoid accusations were a form of psychological torture that he barely escaped. It took us, his family, 2 years to help him rebuild his trust in people, to convince him that not all relationships were a prison. He came to us on Friday night, not just to support me, but because he finally felt safe enough in a relationship to be able to put his phone down and be present with the people he loves. While I was sitting on my parents' couch, crying about the baby I would never hold, my brother was in the other room, silently reading a barrage of messages from his girlfriend accusing him of cheating and mocking my grief. You didn't just break his heart, Camille. You took his deepest trauma, the one he trusted you with, and you used it as a weapon against him. You confirmed his worst fear. That he can never be trusted, and that love is just another word for surveillance. He asked me to tell you not to contact him again. Please respect that, Amelia. I read the email once. Then twice, then a third time, the words blurring through a hot sheet of tears. It wasn't an attack. It was a clinical, devastating autopsy of my actions. The invisible red line I hadn't even known existed. He had told me about his ex, of course. He described her as intense and insecure, but I'd never understood the depth of the wound. I'd seen it as a simple story of a bad breakup, not as the origin story for his deepest vulnerability. My drunken, paranoid rampage hadn't been a random outburst. It had been a precision strike, hitting him exactly where he was most defenseless. I hadn't just been a needy girlfriend. I had become the ghost of his abuser. And in that moment, sitting in the sterile glow of my laptop screen, I finally understood. He hadn't just left me, he had escaped. The days that followed Amelia's email were a blur of hollowed out numbness. The frantic energy was gone, replaced by a heavy, crushing clarity. I was no longer a victim of my own panic. I was the architect of my own ruin, and now I had the blueprints, courtesy of his sister, showing me exactly how I'd done it. I finally dragged myself back to work, moving through the motions like a ghost. I reviewed contracts, drafted memos, and answered emails, my professional competence a bizarre and cruel counterpoint to my personal implosion. At night, I would come home to the suffocating silence of my apartment and sit at my computer. I had to explain, I had to apologize. Not to get him back, I knew, with a certainty that felt like a physical weight in my bones, that it was over. But I couldn't let the last words he ever received from me be that toxic, hateful sludge. He deserved more. Our relationship, the good parts of it, deserved a better ending than a crime scene. So I started writing. I poured everything into that email. I didn't make excuses. I didn't mention Daniel. I didn't try to soften what I'd done. I owned it, all of it. I wrote about my shame, my horror at my own behavior. I wrote about how reading Amelia's words felt like seeing myself for the first time through his eyes, and how much I hated the person I saw. I know now that my insecurity isn't just a quirk or a flaw, I typed, the words feeling inadequate but true. It's a destructive force. And I aimed it directly at the part of you that you were just learning to trust again. There is no excuse for that. It is the single cruelest thing I have ever done. I wrote about the good times, the Sunday mornings in the park with his dog, the way he'd hum off key when he cooked, the time he stayed up all night with me when I had the flu, putting cold cloths on my forehead. I wasn't trying to remind him of what he'd lost. I was trying to show him I remembered what I had destroyed. It was the most honest, painful thing I had ever written. It was a confession, a eulogy, and an apology all in one. It was my emotional autopsy report. I ended it simply: I am not asking for your forgiveness, and I am not asking for another chance. I am just asking that you accept this as the truth of how I feel now, and not let the monster I became that night be your only memory of me. I wish you nothing but peace, Jake. The peace I so selfishly stole from you. I stared at the screen for what felt like hours, my finger hovering over the send button. This was it, my final act. A small, desperate attempt to clean up an oil spill with a paper towel. It wouldn't fix anything, but it was the only decent thing left to do. My finger rested on the trackpad, the cursor blinking patiently over the word send. This was it, the period at the end of our sentence. A final, clean admission of guilt, but then a flicker. A tiny, insidious whisper from the creature in my gut that I thought had been silenced by shame. Is it really all your fault? My hand recoiled from the mouse as if it were hot. The thought was disgusting, a weed pushing up through the concrete of my remorse. But it was there. He could have just texted, it whispered, one emoji, a single fucking thumbs up. It would have taken him 5 seconds. 5 seconds and none of this would have happened. He knows what you're like, he knows your history. He chose to let you spiral, my breath hitched. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to force the thought away, but it was taking root. My fingers, acting on their own volition, moved back to the keyboard. I scrolled to the bottom of my perfect, selfless apology. The cursor blinked at the end of the last paragraph, and then I typed it. But when I really think about it, if you had just taken 10 seconds to send a single text, like you know I needed, maybe none of this would have happened in the first place. The sentence stared back at me from the screen. It was ugly. It was manipulative. It was a pathetic, blame-shifting little barb that completely undermined every ounce of accountability I had just painstakingly crafted. It was the addict's classic refrain, "You made me do this." A wave of self-loathing washed over me so intense it made me nauseous. I backspaced, deleting the words with frantic, punishing taps. Gone, good, I was better than that. I took a deep, shaky breath, ready to finally send the clean version. But my gaze drifted to the empty space where the sentence had been. The silence from his end still roared in my ears. The finality of it all felt so unfair. He got to be the noble, wounded one. He got to walk away clean while I was left here, branded the psycho. And before I knew what I was doing, my fingers had typed it out again. The story ends here, not with a click but with a tremor. It ends with me, Camille, sitting in the cold glow of a laptop screen, my hand frozen over the mouse. It ends with an email that is both a perfect apology and a vile accusation, a testament to my desire to be better and my inability to escape the worst parts of myself. It ends with a blinking cursor, a girl caught in an endless, agonizing loop between repentance and resentment, forever trapped in the moment right before she either saves herself or destroys the last shred of her dignity. Send, delete, send, delete.